BYD, Geely, Chery, and Xpeng, their car sales in Europe have skyrocketed this year. Absolutely incredible numbers. We're looking at an increase across the board of 79%. But between those four brands, their increases in sales in Europe over the last 4 months have been closer to 200%. Even with massive tariffs, absolutely enormous tariffs on their cars being sold in Europe, Chinese brands increased their sales by a staggering 80% over the last 3 months. Hello, my friends. Welcome to the channel. I'm Sam Evans. You're watching the Electric Viking. Would love to see you at the Melbourne EV Auto Show. I'll put a link in the description below. The dates, the details will be in that link. Sales of Chinese EV brands in Europe are growing at a remarkable pace, up by 80% to more than 50,000 in the month of April. What's staggering is the fact that this is happening in spite of these cars not being as cheap as they would be without all these massive tariffs that are being put onto them. In a total market that was flat with 1,085,000 sales, Chinese automakers' share grew to 4.6% from 2.6% in the same period in 2024. It nearly doubled. It's not far off. BYD had the biggest volume growth among Chinese automakers, adding almost 10,000 sales compared with April 2024 for a total volume of 12,560. In fact, BYD sales grew by 360%. Their growth was boosted by the Seal U midsize SUV that added almost 6,000 vehicle sales in April, most of which were the new plug-in hybrid. The tariffs don't apply to plug-in hybrids. That's how Chinese car makers are getting around these tariff challenges. BYD, by the way, have also just begun selling the Seagull, or they call it the Dolphin Surf, for around 20,000 euros. So that might sell well too. Chery had the biggest percentage growth though, up 1,149% on sales of 5,773 in April. The automaker's growth was boosted by its JQ and Omoda upscale brands, which were launched in Europe last year. Chery started from a low base though of 462, but as you can see, Chery sales are growing remarkably quickly. Sales at MG, which people in Europe still think it's a British car brand, but it's owned by SAIC, which is a Chinese-owned conglomerate. Sales grew by 25% to 21,735, led by the MG3 small car, which added more than 4,400 sales compared with last year for a total of more than 4,900 for the month. Despite stronger growth rates from its rivals, MG remained comfortably the top Chinese brand in Europe in April, as well as for the first 4 months with sales of 99,630, ahead of BYD with 41,409 and Chery at 21,571. Other car makers that are doing well in Europe include Zeekr and Xpeng, who have also seen their sales increase. Overall, in April, sales grew by 79% to 50,000 vehicles. And incredibly, that includes not just plug-in hybrids, but also electric cars. Electric car sales were up 41%, and plug-in hybrid sales were up 534%, but coming from a much lower base. So you can see here, predominantly, the number of vehicles sold was the highest, the most popular type of Chinese car in Europe was actually EVs with 16,500 sales. The next was gasoline with 13,786, followed by plug-in hybrids, 9,500, and full hybrids at 8,600. Now, those EV numbers would be much higher if it wasn't for the fact that these tariffs exist, which is quite disappointing, really, I think you could say. Sales at the Geely Group, which in addition to its own brand, includes Lotus, Lynk & Co, Polestar, and Zeekr, grew by 31% to 4,043, making it the fourth largest Chinese automaker in Europe. And considering the brands that it has, it's actually pretty damn good, Polestar, Zeekr, Lynk & Co, Lotus, and Volvo, I'm guessing we're going to see sales for them rise. Now, what about Xpeng? Xpeng sales increased a pretty dramatic 270% to 1,665 in April. They narrowed the gap to fifth place DR Motor, meaning, actually Xpeng sales in Europe are doing incredibly well. And considering most of Xpeng's models still aren't for sale there, their sales should continue to grow over the next 12 months. Sales at DR, an Italian company that distributes mainly in Italy vehicles built in China by various automakers, fell by 15%. So clearly the big winners here, Xpeng is definitely one of them, Geely another one. In addition to them, BYD and Chery. Their sales figures have risen dramatically. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Bye-bye. In April, the best-selling car, regardless of powertrain, was an electric hatchback made by Geely. And interestingly, in fact, very interestingly, Geely is clearly catching up to BYD. I don't know why no one's noticing this fact, but Geely are clearly taking market share. And the top 10 best-selling electric cars in China this year, for the first 4 months of the year, the top 10, number one was not a BYD, was not a Tesla, it was this Geely EV. But Geely, they don't just have the number one best-selling car in China this year. When it comes to electric cars, in the top 10 list, they have 3 of the top 10. BYD only have 2. Electric car sales in China they've risen pretty dramatically this year. And the best-selling EV in the month of April was a car that I think most people, I'd say 99% of people in Australia and the United States and even the UK and Europe would have never ever heard of. But it's a car that, well, it's revolutionizing the value proposition when it comes to buying an EV. I actually think that this car will have an enormous effect on other brands, on the entire market. And, well, there's a very good reason why it's beating BYD. Hello, my friends. Welcome to the channel. Great to have you with us. I'm Sam Evans. You're watching the Electric Viking. In China, in the first 3 months of the year, these were the overall brand rankings. BYD number one with 886,700 sales. Geely second, not that far behind, with 675,000 sales. That means that BYD sales grew by 13%, but Geely's actually grew by 87%. A lot of that is on the back of this new, well, relatively new electric car, which has now sold 200,000 already in less than 6 months on sale. Volkswagen was third with a decline in sales of 3%. Toyota was fourth, up 9%. Wuling up 21%. Chang'an down 18%. Chery plus 26%. Honda down 36%. BMW down 17% and Audi down 11%. You can clearly see what's happening here to these legacy automakers. Volkswagen down, Honda down 36%, BMW down, Audi down. So if the future is Chinese cars, well, which ones are actually selling the best? In April, the best-selling car was the Geely Xingyuan, which sold 36,000 units. Next was BYD's Song. There's a hybrid version and an EV version of the Song, and there was 34,000 of those delivered.